betrayal is one of the deepest wounds a person can experience. It's when someone close to you, someone you trusted, turns against you and hurts you in the most devastating way. In the Bible, we see a powerful example of this kind of betrayal in the story of Mephibosheth. Mephibosheth was the son of Jonathan, the best friend of King David. After the deaths of Jonathan and his father King Saul, David made a promise to always show kindness to Jonathan's family. Years later, Mephibosheth ended up in a place of vulnerability, and it was then that the betrayal from his own servants came to light. This story is a sobering reminder that even those closest to us can sometimes turn against us. Let's dive into the biblical account and see what we can learn from Mephibosheth's experience of betrayal from within. To understand the full context of this story, we need to go back to the very beginning and look at Mephibosheth's background. Mephibosheth was the son of Jonathan, who was the son of King Saul. When Saul and Jonathan were killed in battle, David became the new king of Israel. Even though Saul had been David's rival, David made a solemn promise to Jonathan that he would always show kindness to Jonathan's family. In 2 Samuel 9, we read that David inquired if there was anyone left of Saul's household to whom he could show kindness for Jonathan's sake. David's servants then told him about Mephibosheth, Jonathan's son, who was living in obscurity. Mephibosheth had become lame in both his feet as a young boy, after a nurse had dropped him while fleeing from the news of Saul and Jonathan's deaths. Despite his disability, David welcomed Mephibosheth to live in the royal palace and restored to him all the land that had belonged to his grandfather Saul. This was an incredibly generous and gracious act on David's part. He did not have to show kindness to the family of his former rival, Saul. But because of his love and loyalty to his dear friend Jonathan, David extended undeserved favor to Mephibosheth. Mephibosheth was essentially adopted into David's own family and would have lived a life of privilege and security. However, this peaceful and prosperous situation for Mephibosheth would not last. A new character is then introduced, Ziba, one of Saul's former servants. Ziba comes to David with a troubling report about Mephibosheth. In 2 Samuel 16, we read that Ziba told David, "Behold, he remains in Jerusalem, for he said, 'Today the house of Israel will give me back the kingdom of my father.'" Ziba accused Mephibosheth of plotting to overthrow David and reclaim the throne of his grandfather Saul. This was a shocking and disturbing allegation. Mephibosheth had been living comfortably under David's protection and provision. Why would he now suddenly be plotting against the king? Ziba's words painted Mephibosheth as an ungrateful and treacherous individual. David, apparently believing Ziba's story, then grants all of Mephibosheth's property to Ziba. This was a devastating blow to Mephibosheth, who was now stripped of his land and livelihood. Ziba's deceit had turned the king against him. When Mephibosheth later gets the chance to speak for himself, his response is quite different from Ziba's accusation. In 2 Samuel 19, Mephibosheth tells David, "My lord the king, my servant Ziba deceived me. For your servant said to him, 'Saddle the donkey for me to ride on it and go with the king, for your servant is lame.' He has slandered your servant to my lord the king." Mephibosheth explains that he had actually wanted to go with David, but his servant Ziba had prevented him from doing so by not saddling his donkey. Ziba had then used this opportunity to make up the lie about Mephibosheth planning a coup. Mephibosheth professes his loyalty to David, saying that he has done nothing to betray the king. He acknowledges his disability and expresses his desire to simply serve David faithfully. This paints a very different picture from Ziba's accusations. David then says to Mephibosheth, "Why do you speak any more of your affairs? I have decided, you and Ziba shall divide the land." In other words, David essentially reinstates the original arrangement, splitting the land between Mephibosheth and Ziba. This seems like a reasonable compromise, but it still leaves Mephibosheth in a diminished state compared to before. He has lost half of what was rightfully his, all because of Ziba's treacherous lies. So what was really going on here? Why did Ziba, one of Mephibosheth's own servants, betray him in this way? The biblical text does not give us Ziba's full motivations, but we can make some inferences. Ziba was originally a servant of Saul's household. When Saul's dynasty fell, Ziba likely saw an opportunity to ingratiate himself with the new king, David. By making up this story about Mephibosheth's supposed disloyalty, Ziba was able to position himself as a faithful informant to the king. In doing so, Ziba was able to receive a substantial reward, the entirety of Mephibosheth's property. This was a classic case of opportunism and self-interest. Ziba was willing to betray a member of his own household in order to gain favor and material benefit for himself. We also get a glimpse into Ziba's character when, after the truth comes out, he simply accepts David's decision to split the land. Ziba does not protest or seek to make amends for his deception. He seems content to keep half of what he had wrongfully obtained, happy to profit from his betrayal of Mephibosheth. This paints Ziba as a shrewd and scheming individual, more concerned with his own advancement than with loyalty or integrity. He was willing to throw Mephibosheth under the bus in order to curry favor with the king. Tragically, his deceit succeeded, at least for a time. Imagine how Mephibosheth must have felt in this situation. He had been living securely under David's protection, enjoying the king's generosity and hospitality. And then, without warning, one of his own servants turned against him with a devastating lie. Not only did this lie cost Mephibosheth half of his rightful inheritance, but it also threatened to undermine his relationship with the king. David, who had shown him such kindness, was now prepared to turn against him based on Ziba's account. This must have been an incredibly painful and disorienting experience for Mephibosheth. He had done nothing wrong, yet he found himself stripped of his possessions and under suspicion from the king. The betrayal of his own servant had shaken the very foundations of his life. Betrayal always carries a deep emotional wound. When someone close to us, someone we've trusted, turns against us, it can feel like a profound violation. Our sense of security and belonging is shattered. We may even question our own judgment and discernment. In Mephibosheth's case, the pain of betrayal was compounded by the fact that it came from within his own household. Ziba was not some external enemy, but one of Mephibosheth's own servants, someone he had likely known and worked with for years. The breach of that trust must have been excruciating. The story of Mephibosheth and Ziba is a powerful reminder that betrayal can come from the most unexpected places. But even in the midst of that pain, we can find hope, wisdom, and the strength to persevere. In conclusion, the betrayal that Mephibosheth experienced at the hands of his own servant Ziba is a sobering and cautionary tale. It shows us that even those closest to us can sometimes turn against us, often driven by their own selfish motives. Mephibosheth's story reminds us to be discerning, to maintain our integrity even in the face of injustice, and to ultimately place our trust in God rather than in fickle human relationships. Betrayal is always a deep wound, but with God's help, we can find the strength to endure and move forward. May Mephibosheth's example inspire us to be people of character, to extend grace even to those who've wronged us, and to hold fast to the truth, no matter the cost. For in the end, God's justice will prevail, and the betrayers will be exposed. Let us learn from this biblical narrative and apply its lessons to our own lives.